We observe today a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God the same solemn oath.
Well, today we're going to be wrapping up this series we've been in over the last couple weeks called Dream Job. And throughout this whole series, we've been talking about a topic that's so relevant to every single one of our lives, which is work, or which is our job. And in fact, the question we've asked throughout this whole series is it possible? Is it possible for you and I to close the gap between our day job and our dream job? In other words, is it possible to close that gap between our day job, which sometimes can feel like detention between weekends, or, that day job that feels like, hey, there's a dissatisfaction. Is this all there is? Is it possible to close the gap with that and our dream job, which is all about purpose, our dream job that has meaning, our dream job that we actually look forward to going to? Is it possible to close the gap? And the answer to that question we've said throughout the series is absolutely. That's absolutely possible. And so if you haven't been here in part 1 or 2, I really want to encourage you to go online at npaustin.com. You can catch up on what we've said so far because, again, this is such a relevant topic for every single one of our lives. Now, today I want to talk about attention that I think work illuminates more than anything else. In fact, I think the attention we're going to talk about today, I think work kind of like presses this to the surface in your life and my life, this very specific tension. And guys, I got to be upfront with you. I personally struggle with this. This is something I've struggled with my whole life, and perhaps you've struggled with it, or you will struggle with the tension we're talking about today. But if we can get this right, if we can talk about it just for a few minutes, and if we can get this tension right, I'm telling you, it's one of the greatest things you and I could do in our life to close the gap between our day job and dream job. So the question becomes, what's the tension? What's this whole thing about? What is it you struggle with, Buck? Well, to explain that, I want to bring your attention to this word, because this tension we're going to talk about has to do with time, and it has to do with our careers. And to illustrate that, I want you to kind of focus on this table over here, because this table really represents my life. And so let me introduce you to a couple things in my life. First, I want to introduce you to myself. Here I am. This jar represents me. And the purple liquid in here represents my time, that I have a finite amount of time. And then in my life, I have my wife right here. She is absolutely stunning. Look at her. And we've been married for over 20 years. And then together we've got 5 boys. We've got Sam, who's 16, Luke, who's 15, Timbo, who's 14. I know that, but, just trying to think. They're so close together. And then we had surprise twin boys. We've got Michael and Jonathan. So we've got a bunch of boys. And then in my life, I've got, work is a responsibility. I've got personal. Personal is like personal development. This is like those things, hey, these books I want to read, these specific skills I want to develop, different skill sets. And then I've got health. And this is the whole idea about, personal health, emotional health. This could be working out. It could be counseling, these kind of things. And then hobbies, of course. And, I love to play golf. I love to go up to the land in Lampasas. Jill's dad has some land up there, and we love to go up there and just hang out. It's refreshing. UFC fight nights, those kind of hobbies. And then friends and family. This is, Jill's parents and my dad and, extended family, the whole thing. And then last but certainly not least is God. And here's how this works, is that in my life, I've got a finite amount of time. And what's interesting to think about is, according to the latest research, you and I will spend a third of our lives sleeping, which we don't really give credit or think about that. But the fact is, if you sleep 6 to 8 hours a night, a third of your time goes by sleep. And then what we've discovered throughout this series is the average person is going to spend a third of their lives at work. So then here you go. You get about a third of this goes into your job. And that leaves you with this much time. So you and I, this is basically what we have. And then when we look at our life, I begin to think, okay, how should I prioritize this? And I think, well, I need to, spend time with God. And, that's important. God helps me see clear. God reminds me of who I am, reminds me of how I can relate to him, reminds me of purpose and meaning. But when I spend time with God, then I think, oh man, I've got this early morning meeting I got to go, and I got to spend time here, and this is a little bit extra over here. And then I think about my life and I go, well, I'm married to Jill. I want to continue to develop our marriage. And if we're going to have a healthy marriage, if we're going to have a sexy marriage, you guys know that requires time. And so, I want to, have these conversations, discover her. But hey, there's this thing at work that came up, babe. I'm so sorry. I got to stay extra at work. And so then, I go spend some more time at work. And then I think about my boys. And I'm going, oh, wow, there's so many things they want to do. It's like Sam in football, Luke in golf, Timbo in football. Timbo loves to do everything. He's our Bob Marley son. He wants to fish. He wants to weld, like pretty much everything. He's like, Dad, just do this. And then the twins, they just want to play Fortnite all the time. Dad, play Fortnite with me. And I'm like, what am I going to do, Then I'll be like, Sam, hey, next week, can we throw the football? Hey, Luke, can we go out to the golf course? Hey, I'm going to spend a little bit of time. We can do that. But hey, here's this deal. I've got a conference coming up. And so I got to spend some time. I'll be away a couple days, And then I think about Jonathan. And Jonathan loves Gaddyland. And so I go, okay, I'll take you to Gaddyland, spend some time over there. And then I think to myself, my health, I just started, jogging over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I think, after not jogging for 2 decades and then you begin to jog, that takes some time. And then I got to cool down because I'm like, what's happening inside my chest? And, then I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of time. And then I look at this reality. And I go, what happened? Because, I still need to spend time with Sam and, Luke and Michael. And I didn't get to what I wanted to get to personally. And what about extended family and friends and golf and all? And my point is, and I think we all experience this. My point is there's simply not enough time. Now, you may hear that and you may go, well, Buck, no. Because I've been to a seminar, I've read a book. And if you're just more disciplined, that's the key to this. Just be more disciplined, then you can get a bunch of time back. You have enough time, and I get that. Or you may push on this and you go, no, this is a scheduling issue. If you put the big rocks in first, and then you can put your pebbles in, then you can put your pieces of sand in, if you've ever seen that illustration, you can maximize your time. And I get all that, guys. And I think there's value to those things. But it doesn't negate the fact at the end of the day, you and I do not have enough time to get everything done. Just think about it. If I was to do everything that was required of me and that I wanted to do at work, answer every single email, every single text, every single phone call, read every single book, do all the research I need to do to get ready for Sunday mornings, meet with all the different individuals, take advantage of every strategic opportunity. At the end of the day, I could work 365 days a year, and 24 hours a day, and I still wouldn't have enough time. If I thought about everything that when it comes to my family and everything, Sam's asking and Timbo's asking and Luke's asking and the intentionality around marriage and all this kind of stuff, you add up all that, you're like, there's simply not enough time. Discipline, yes, is helpful. Prioritization of schedules, yes, is helpful. But it doesn't negate the fact that you and I, at the end of the day, we do not have enough time to get it all done. Which means you and I are going to eventually rob something or someone. And the reason why work makes this so difficult, work kind of confuses us. Work kind of makes it cloudy, like who am I going to rob? Because you're going to have to pick. Work, the thing about work, it's immediate. The thing about work, when you go there, you get a paycheck. The thing about work, you get immediate reflection points. You get feedback, even if it's negative. You get your quarterly awards. You get bonuses. You get progress. You can see the ball moving down the field here. When I go fishing with Timbo, when I go to Chewy's and have jalapeno ranch and have a date night with Jill, it's great, good for the taste buds, but I just don't see the progress and the accomplishment that I see here at work. And I'm telling you, that makes this dilemma, this tension, this struggle, even that much more complex. And guys, like I said, I struggle with this. And the thing is we can get this wrong. And the danger is when you end up robbing the wrong jar, when you rob the wrong thing, you know what that leads to? It leads to a thing called regret. As you get to a place in your life down the road where you look back and you go, man, I can't go back to my 30s. I can't go back to my 20s. I can't go back to when they were 5 or when they were 10. I just can't go back to those moments. And it leads to regret. When we rob the wrong thing, it leads to lack of happiness. I mean, we've talked about this here at North Point, is that the number one thing, according to the most objective research, the longest running study ever done on happiness, the number one thing that leads to happiness in your life is the quality of your relationships. And when we rob the most important relationships in our life, and then we struggle with happiness and struggle with that kind of low-grade depression over here, and where's purpose and where's meaning and where's significant in our life, that's something we'll struggle with. And ultimately, one of the things we'll struggle with is actually closing the gap between our day job and our dream job. So what do we do? Because at the end of the day, the reality is, you and I, we do not have enough time. Well, the good news is there's actually something you and I can do, and it's very practical, and it's very tangible. And in fact, there's a decision we can all make in our lives. And the coolest thing is if you're willing to make the decision, if you're willing to move forward and make this decision in your life, I mean, it's a thing that it ultimately does lead to happiness. It leads to purpose, it leads to meaning, it leads to significance. And if we're willing to make this decision, I would argue and I would say it's perhaps the greatest thing and the most important thing we can do to close the gap between our day job and our dream job. So the question becomes, well, what is this decision? Well, today I want to show you that. And I want to do that by looking at this old, ancient individual by the name of Daniel. Now, if you grew up in church, you may have heard of this guy named Daniel. Maybe you've heard about Daniel in the lion's den, you know that whole story. Or maybe you heard about Daniel and his buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know that whole thing. There's a little song with it, the whole deal. You know, maybe you heard that in Sunday school or what have you. I mean, that's Daniel. His life is extraordinary. In fact, we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks talking about all these different aspects and elements and the depth of his life and his decisions. But today what I want to do is I want to take the life of Daniel. Daniel lived about 550 years before Jesus shows up on the scene, so that's kind of the historical marker. I want to take his life, and I want to kind of look at this very specific thing down here that happened at the beginning of his life. And what happened right there in the life of Daniel was a decision he made. It was a pivotal decision. It was a game-changing kind of decision that set the course for the rest of his life. And the reason why I want to look at it, because you can make that kind of decision. I can make that kind of decision, and it has huge implications in our life. So what is that decision he made? So to give you context to what's going on, again, this happens about 550 years before Jesus shows up on the scene, so about 2,500 years ago. And 2,500 years ago, the most powerful nation in the world was Babylon. I mean, they were the superior ones. They ruled the world. And the king of Babylon, his name was Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar employed a strategy anytime he conquered a nation that I think was absolutely brilliant. And the strategy that he did is anytime he conquered a nation, he would go in and he would take the beautiful, he would take the royalty, he would take the intelligent, he would take the top engineers, the top scientists, if you will. He would take the people with the highest IQs, and he would bring all those individuals back into Babylon, and he would immerse them in the Babylonian culture. He would give them a Babylonian name. He would make them dress Babylonian. They would, get all the different piercings, the Babylonian piercings. They would learn the whole Babylonian educational system. They'd learn the whole Babylonian culture. And the reason he did that is because he wanted the best. He wanted the brightest. He wanted the most powerful to become Babylonian and then begin to rule his nation. And that's what he did over and over to empower the nation of Babylon. And it worked. It was brilliant. Well, about 550 years before Jesus shows up, the nation of Babylon, they invade Israel. And so they do this. They take the bold, they take the beautiful, they take the bright back to Babylon, and that's where we pick up the story of Daniel in Daniel chapter 1. So here's what's going on. It says that the king ordered Ashpenaz, and Ashpenaz was like the right-hand man of King Nebuchadnezzar. So that's the context. The king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. These were the Israelites that were, captured when they conquered the nation. And so this was kind of the qualifications. This is interesting. Look at this. The qualifications for those that they brought back were young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. That's their future career. That's their future job, is to serve in the kingdom of Babylon. This is Ashpenaz, was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. So here you have it. They bring these people, one of these individuals was Daniel from the nation of Israel. So we can kind of get a description of who Daniel was and what his life was like before he was captured. And then Ashpenaz, his whole role was to immerse them. He was their professor, to immerse them in the Babylonian culture. And he would teach them the Babylonian language, which was Akkadian. He would give them an Akkadian name, which again, the Babylonian language. And the name for Daniel, the Babylon name was Belshazzar. So you've got Belshazzar, that's his Babylonian name, and Daniel, same guy. And so Daniel's being immersed in this whole culture, and it continues, and it gives us even more insight. It said the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained, look at this detail, for 3 years. And after that, they were to enter into the king's service. So that was their job. That was their future career, the king's service. So for 3 years, they got their undergrad. For 3 years, they got their master's, they got their graduate degree, however you want to think about it. But the bottom line is, they were immersed in every aspect of the whole Babylonian way of life. So all this is taking place in the life of Daniel. He's being immersed, his ears are pierced, his clothes are different, he walks like, he talks like, pretty much, the whole Babylonian thing. And then we come to the decision. And guys, pay attention, because this is a decision that changed everything. And here it is. But Daniel resolved not to. Now, the word resolved literally means I'm putting my heels down. The word resolve means, hey, I'm drawing the line in the sand and I will not go any further. The word resolved is this idea about I am putting a stake in the ground, and from this day forward, I will live this way. Daniel resolved not to. So Daniel, what's the big deal? What was the issue here? Because this is pretty dramatic. Would you resolve not to? And he tells us. Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Which at first reading, come on, this is a little bit confusing, because you read this and you're like, really? This is filet mignon, baby. This is lobster. This is mac and cheese with bacon. You guys like that stuff? I'm into that. This is the best of the best food you could possibly imagine. And this is where you put your foot down? This is where you resolve? Like, really? Daniel, can we pick a better decision here? So the context here is so incredibly important. So here's what's going on, and I think this will make much more sense. The context is the king's food, before it got to the king's table, was sacrificed to the Babylonian, the high god Marduk. And they would take this and they would offer it to Marduk and say all these different things and, sacrifice all these things. And then they would take the food and then they would put that on the king's table. And everybody, including the king himself, who ate from the king's table, that was symbolically pledging their allegiance to the god Marduk and saying, my loyalty is to Marduk. My homage is to Marduk. My worship is to Marduk. Marduk is the one who gave me my talents. Marduk is the one who gave me my gifts. Marduk is the one who's blessed me. I will worship my god Marduk. And that was the idea. They would take these people from all these different nations, they would immerse them in the Babylonian culture, and then they would walk away from their gods and they would begin to serve the one true God, Marduk. Well, Daniel's one true God was the God of Israel. That's who Daniel worshiped. And so what was happening is this food from the king's table came down to the wise men's table. This is a table of Daniel. And now he had a decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to choose Marduk? Or am I going to choose the God of Israel? And this was Daniel's dilemma. This was his tension, because he couldn't have it both ways. He had to make a choice. He had to have resolve to go, okay, God of Israel, I believe that you're a faithful God. I believe you're my God. I believe you're for me. I believe you love me. And I'm going to make a decision right now, and it could cost me my life. It could cost me my reputation. Daniel's only career option was in Babylon. It could cost him his career or career advancement, his whole job. But God, I trust you, and I trust you with the outcomes, even though I don't know them. He could make that choice, or he could go, Marduk, you are my new God. and I pledge all my allegiance and loyalty to you. And God of Israel, please forgive me. Please have mercy on me. He couldn't have it both ways. He had to pick. And guys, I'm telling you, as I read that this week, I thought, oh man, isn't that what I feel almost every day of my life? Isn't that what I feel every week and every month? This same kind of tension, it feels big. But my tension isn't, and your tension isn't with Marduk and the God of Israel. You know what our tension is with? Our tension is with time. And specifically, if you had to boil it down with what we're talking about in the context of everything in your life and my life, the biggest tension is between work and home. It's between work and home. And to illustrate that, let's come back to the table. Think about it this way. Oftentimes what we do with our kids and our family, we say, hey, sweetie, it's going to be another night. Hey, I know I told you, I know I promised, but I just got to work late another night. Hey, kids, I knew this. I told you no more business trips, but I'm just telling you the opportunity is huge. And it's going to benefit our family, and it's going to benefit you. So, hey, listen, there's just one more business trip. Hey, I know I said this after the promotion. I know I said after the promotion things would change, but listen, I had no idea the pressure. I had no idea the responsibility. People's livelihoods depend upon my leadership. So sweetie, honey, kids, can you just hang on? Can you just hang on while I do this? And here's the deal. Like our kids and our spouse, they get it. Intellectually, the mom's got to work, dad's got to work. It makes sense. I get it. But do you know how they emotionally process this? Do you know emotionally how they process? Emotionally, they go, I guess dad's work is more important than me. I guess mom's work is more important than me. I guess his career, his job, his title, his opportunities are more important than our relationship. And you know it, don't you? Because you've seen it. And when you see it in the eyes of your son, when you see it in the eyes of your spouse, someone you love, and you see it, what do you do with that? What do you do with that emotional tension? I'll tell you one of the things we do. One of the things we do is we come back over here, and especially if you're a God follower, and even if you're not a God follower, we do this. We begin to pray these kind of prayers. We begin to say, hey, God, would you just put a hedge of protection, or would you protect, or would you, take care of my family while I take care of the gaps here? God, would you fill in the gaps over here? Would you just push, your mercy and your grace and help them understand? This is for them. I'm trying to give them a better life and a better, experiences than I've ever had as a little boy or a little girl. God, would you help them see it from my perspective? And would you fill all the gaps over here while I take care of the gaps here? Guys, do you know what that's like? Do you know what that tension's like? To illustrate what that's like, I want to introduce you to two things. The first thing I want to show you is this white bucket. This white bucket actually represents my responsibilities, kind of my job, right? The whole thing. And this belongs to me. This is mine. It's not anybody else's. This is my responsibilities. The second thing I want to introduce you to illustrate this is I want to introduce you to somebody I've never introduced you to, and I've really never done this. I want to introduce you to my youngest son, Michael. So would you give a warm welcome for Michael as he comes on out? Now, I don't know if you noticed something about this part of Michael. It's just awesome, isn't it? He made this choice. This was your choice, right? Oh, you think? Yeah, I don't know where he gets it from anyways. But this is my youngest son. He's my youngest by 2 minutes because his twin brother, Jonathan, was born 2 minutes just ahead. But he is a very speedy guy on the field when he plays football, when we go out and do that. He is so fast, and he's fun to watch. And I love you, Big, and I'm crazy proud of you, and thank you for doing this. Okay, so you ready? Yeah. Okay. So here's what happens. Here's this whole dynamic. This is my responsibility, right? This is mine. It belongs to me. But what happens when it comes to our work, what happens when it comes to our job is, things come up. And hey, I got to work late. Something came up. Hey, there's this conference. I'm going to be gone for a few days, or I'm going to be gone for a week. Hey, there's this season. Seasons happen. Hey, for the next few weeks, for the next month, I've just got to work a ton, and I'm going to miss a football game. I'm going to miss that recital. I'm going to miss, that one thing or whatever it may be. And what we end up doing is we say, hey, would you hold on to my responsibilities? Would you just hold that? And listen, it's just one more night. Hey, it's just this season. Hey, it's just this business trip. And listen, our spouse is going to hold it. Our kids are going to hold it. And do you know why? because they love us. And because they want to be a good wife, I want to be a good husband, I want to be a good son, I want to be a good daughter. And so they end up holding it. And then I come home from the business trip, and I take this from Michael. And then I come home from, that late night, and I take this, and this is my responsibility, and I take it back, right? That's normal. That's how life works. But the problem is when we, in essence, permanently hand this over to those that we love. And we say, I know, I promised it wouldn't be another late night. I promised I wouldn't miss another football game. But you just don't understand, son. I mean, this is for you. I'm doing all this for you. Would you just hold on? I know I told you, that I wouldn't have another business trip. I know I told you it was just a season, but please hold on. I didn't know all the pressures I was going to face. And plus, this is for your benefit and for your future. Just hold on. Hold on. And they're going to do it because they love you. And they're going to do it because they want to be a good son. But eventually, their mental willingness is going to become overcome by their emotional and physical fatigue. And eventually, they're going to drop it. Thank you, big guy. All right. Guys, do you know what it sounds like when the bucket drops in our life? Do you know what that sounds like? It sounds like, I don't know what happened. We're just like roommates. The intimacy in our marriage is just not there any longer. We're just passing one another and kind of going back and forth. Do you know what happens and what it sounds like when the bucket drop? It sounds like, just my family. It just feels like there's no real connection. There's no real camaraderie. It just feels like everybody's doing their own thing. I have no idea why. I mean, aren't they grateful? Do you know what this sounds like when the bucket drops? Hey, I love you. I really do. I'm exhausted. And would you just sign these papers? Do you know what this sounds like when the bucket drops? I don't know what happened to my son. I don't know what happened to my daughter. I mean, they just withdrew from everything. They're so distant. It's like I've completely lost their heart and any influence with them. And I have no idea what happened. And I'm telling you, here's what's so interesting is when we walk into the house and we experience this. When we walk in and we see the distance with our kids or the distance with our spouse, we go, what happened? I mean, it's just like, it's in one day. All I was doing was working. All I was doing was providing for you. All I was doing is, trying to give you a better life. This feels like it's overnight. It's overnight. But the truth is, it wasn't overnight. It was a process. Day after day, week after week, month after month, season after season. You're robbed the wrong thing. And guys, this is a tension I think we all are currently facing or you will face in your life. And for some of us, if we're honest, the people that we love the most, the bucket is slipping out of their hand. So the moral of the story is we've got to learn from Daniel. Daniel faced a very similar dilemma. He faced a decision. He had no idea what hung in the balance of that decision. But Daniel resolved not to. Daniel said, "This is as far as I will go. And God, I know that you are faithful. God, I know that you are the creator of work. You're the creator of economy. You own everything under the sun. I know you know exactly what I need. And I don't know if this will cost me my life. I don't know if this will cost me my career. I don't know if this will cost me my reputation. But this is as far as I will go. God, I trust you." And what's so cool is that's exactly what happened. See, what Daniel understood is the faithfulness of God. So he resolved and he made a decision and he experienced God. Now, God. Now the door is open to God in that decision. Now we've opened our career and our future to God. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. And Daniel faced a dilemma. Daniel couldn't have it both ways. He was going to rob someone at the expense of the other. And he had resolved and trusted God, and he experienced a now God moment. That when he said, God, okay, I don't know, but you do. God, I feel like, nobody understands all my circumstances. Nobody could face all the different tensions and pressures that I face. But you do. You know my heart. You know my future. You know what I need and don't need. And he trusted God, and I'm telling you, he opened the floodgates to the faithfulness of God in his life. And that's what you see in the rest of the story of Daniel. It's an amazing story. I mean, eventually Daniel goes from his day job, and this trying to be trained and all this kind of stuff, and eventually he becomes one of the highest officials, one of the most powerful people in the nation that ruled the world. And he experienced his dream job. So, as we think about all of that, that's a lot to process. I want you to personally think about something in your life. I want you to personally think about these questions. In your life, who are you robbing? For real. Like in your life, who are you robbing? Is it your son, your daughter, your spouse? That significant relationship in your life? Who are you robbing? Another question I want you to think about is this. For you, what are you robbing? Maybe you would say, well, Buck, I don't have a spouse and kids, and but I do feel this kind of low-grade depression. I feel this like, is this all there is? Is there any more purpose? Is there any more meaning in life? And maybe for you, it's the what. Because maybe you're robbing some personal development. Maybe you're robbing your health. Maybe you have felt this for a long time. Maybe you're robbing God. Maybe you're robbing some of your most significant relationships to accomplish that academic purpose, to stay on that team, or for whatever reasons. Maybe it's the what for you. But what are you robbing? And maybe the most important question, who in your life feels robbed? And this is a tough one, because I know what we would say. If you ask me this question, I'm with you. I'm human. I'm like you guys, If you said this, I go, well, I don't think, Michael, Jonathan, and I would give you a lot of kind of things as to why I don't think they feel robbed. But if I had the unfiltered version of the heart of your son, the heart of your daughter, the heart of your spouse, the heart of those most significant relationships, and they could tell me or tell you, who feels robbed in your life? And see, from what we've learned from Daniel, what's so important to understand is when we resolve not to, when we make that decision, I'm just telling you, it is an invitation for the now God moment. When we resolve not to say, I'm no longer going to cheat my home. I'm no longer going to rob my home. I'm no longer going to rob God. I'm no longer going to rob, my spouse. I'm no longer going to rob that thing. When you make that decision, I'm just telling you, I know it is a scary one. I know there's a lot of fear with that. I know there's a lot of pushback. You just don't understand. But you know who does? God does. He gets the whole context. And when you decide to step into this decision and say, this is as far as I will go, that is opening the doors wide open for a God moment in your life. I've just seen it. I've seen his faithfulness. I can't tell you how many stories and how many people I've sat on the other side of have made this decision. And logically, when you think about it, and even sometimes financially when you think about it, you would go like, that was crazy. But then they tell the rest of their story and you're like, oh man, that's amazing how God showed up. Guys, I've personally experienced this in my life time and time again. In fact, a story I've shared a couple times, is, in the early days of North Point, when we started North Point, it was perhaps one of the most demanding things I've ever done in my entire life. And if you've ever started an organization or been part of, organizational kind of leadership and start this whole thing that your livelihood and reputation, it's just all kind of wrapped in there that you felt that. I mean, you know how difficult it is to start something. You know what I'm talking about. In those early days, it was Jill and our 5 sons, were at home, and it was 5 sons, 6 years and younger. Imagine our, diaper bill. That was just ridiculous. But, that was our reality. And so I would come home day after day, week after week, month after month, and I would just see exhaustion on their faces. I would see exhaustion on the face of Jill. And I knew it. It's that thing I talked about earlier. I knew it. She was going, hey, I want to be a good wife. And my boys were, I want to be good sons. So, Dad, we know you're doing an important work. We know that you're trying to provide for us. But emotionally, I could feel it. They're like, Dad, it really seems like that's more important than us. And so one day, I thought about this tension in the early days of North Point, and I sat down with Jill. And I just said, babe, okay, I see this. He said, I don't know what to do, but my question for you is, what would be ideal? What's ideal for us? So ideally, what would it look like for me to come home at a certain time? Like if you could pick any time for me to come home, what ideally speaking does that look like? And Jill reflected to me, and she just said, hey, if you could be home between 4 and 4:30, I'm just telling you, that's when everything hits the fan. That's when it just gets so hard with the boys and you just everything. And she said, if you could do that, man, that would be awesome. And I just looked at her in my mind. I was like, that's impossible. I can't. I mean, there's so many meetings, so many things to do. Don't you know the future of North Point? I mean, and just all this stuff. But, I said, okay, I'll do it. Resolve not to. I'm not going to cheat my boys any longer. I'm not going to cheat Jill and rob her any longer. And so I knew that there were phone calls I couldn't return. I knew there were texts I couldn't return. I knew there were people I wouldn't be able to meet with. I knew I'd be misunderstood, and people would go, oh, he just doesn't care about, anybody but himself, and, these kind of things. And I get all that. It's all part of it. But I was not going to rob my family any longer. And guys, I'm telling you, since then, look at the faithfulness of God. Just look in the mirror. You are the faithfulness of God. Look at what God has done. It's been unbelievable to see the things. I mean, God's allowed us to make a move from the elementary school into this facility, which is an amazing, amazing tool to be used. Think of all the hundreds and hundreds of lives. I mean, some of your lives have been changed as a result of your leadership and what God's done and God's faithfulness. God has been incredibly faithful in the midst of that decision. And not only that, but my kids have gotten older. That 4 to 4:30 hour, that's changed in time. And about a year and a half ago, I made another decision very similar to this. A year and a half ago, I was thinking about my boys, and they're getting older, and they're all getting more independent. And during the week, they go to school, and they do all their stuff, and, they're with their friends and extracurricular activities, and they're just always gone during the week. And so, I was thinking, well, they're home more often on the weekends. But my conflict is my job feels like it amps up in the weekends, particularly on Sunday mornings. So there was a tension because for years and years and years and years and years, I worked Saturday morning, Saturday evening, Saturday morning, Saturday evening, Saturday morning, Saturday evening. And when I would leave Saturday evening, I would watch my boys and I would see it in their eyes again. And they're older now, but I could see that, oh, Dad, what are you doing? Oh, Dad, what are you doing? And so a year and a half ago, I made the decision. I'm not going to work Saturday nights any longer. I'm going to do everything I can to be responsible. And that was a hard decision because what I do is very public. And you get it. If you stand up here, it's like, hey, Buck, you're not good enough today. Hey, you're not deep enough today. Hey, it's not sophisticated enough. You feel all those pressures, and I get those, and I accept those responsibilities. But I had a lot of tension with that decision. Oh, my gosh, what if I could forget? What if? But I said, God, you're faithful. I know you're for me. I know, you created communication. I get it. God, I trust you. In the last year and a half, it's been incredible to see what we've seen. God is so faithful. It's so amazing to think about our future. Over the last year and a half, we've been able to purchase 14 acres. I don't know if you guys have seen the last couple days, there's some big equipment starting to show up. And the next couple days, we're going to start to see a bunch of dirt moved. And our future's ahead of us. And God's faithfulness has been here time and time again. I'm just telling you, I know you have no idea what hangs in the balance. Oftentimes, I have no idea what hangs in the balance, but I do know that God is faithful. So, as you think about it, who are you robbing? What are you robbing? And who in your life feels robbed? And as a result of that, if you're willing to answer that question, if you're willing to be brave enough to step into that and go, okay, I'm going to discover that, and I promise that's a decision you will not regret. But once you identify that, then it has implications. And the implications of this, the answer to these questions are for some of you, you're going to need to change your career. And I don't say that lightly. I know how hard you've worked. I know the sacrifice you've given. But the reality is there is no way forward in that career. And I know all the fear associated with that. Well, what about, and how's this? And God, it's my family. And I know that. But God knows that as well. And for some of you, the reality is, if you're going to stop robbing the wrong thing, it means you've got to change your career. For others of you, it means you're going to have a hard conversation, maybe tonight, maybe this week, to sit down and go, hey, I don't know how to tell you this in the most gentle, loving way, but you just got to know the bucket's about to drop. I'm exhausted. I feel like I've been robbed for entirely too long. Can we talk about it? For some of you, this means a hard conversation with your boss. You're going to have to sit down and say, hey, I'm committed to the company. I'm committed to the bottom line. I want to see the future happen. But at the end of the day, I can't cheat my family, rob my family any longer. I can give you 45 hours, and I will work hard those 45 hours, but that's it. For some of you, you're going to have to apologize. Because some of you, you're hearing this for the first time, and you're on the kind of this side of it to where your kids are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And they're growing, and you've already made the decisions. But there's something we can all do. And I'm telling you, growing up on the other side of our workaholic parents, both of my parents just worked all the time. I'm telling you, as a little boy, little girl, one of the voices that gets in your head is you begin to think it's you. You begin to think, can I perform more? Can I do more? Can I say more? Why would mom and dad not give me their attention, not prioritize me? And I'm telling you, I've met on the other side of men in their 40s and 50s and 60s, and I hear that same voice. Can I do enough? Can I do enough? Can I do enough? Maybe today you're hearing this for the very first time in your life. And you're thinking, man, I wish I heard this 30, 40 years ago. What do I do? Well, you can do something. You can release your son. You can release your daughter from that voice and say, hey, all those years, that wasn't you. That wasn't anything about you. That was me. That was my brokenness. That was my decision. I just want you to know you are my priority. And I'm so incredibly sorry. Do you know how that can release a son or daughter? Whew. For some of you, it's to apologize. For others, it's to say no. The promotion's more money. The promotion may be more title. More experiences. But we all know this, that our kids don't want more experiences. I mean, they'll argue that probably. But they want more relationally richness. They want you to be there and discover their hearts. Which means maybe for this season. In another season you can say yes, but maybe this season you need to say no to the promotion. For some of you, maybe you need to reprioritize kids and home, because maybe you're a stay-at-home mom. And maybe you've prioritized your kids over your husband. Maybe you've prioritized the cleanliness and the structure of your home over your husband, and you're robbing your husband. For all of us, I think if we're willing to be brave and answer those questions, there's something that we're robbing. And if we're willing to make that decision, if we're willing to say when we resolve, to have that resolve not to, and stop robbing the wrong thing, it is an invitation for a God moment. And that's where purpose is going to be found. That's where that satisfaction is going to be found. That's where happiness, because you're investing in the right relationships and you have the time to do that, is going to be found. And I'm just telling you, it's one of the greatest things you and I could do when it comes to our career, to close the gap between our day job and our dream job. So who feels robbed in your life? What are you robbing in your life? And are you willing to make that Daniel kind of decision and say, God, I trust you with the outcomes? That's an invitation for God and his faithfulness to get all involved. Let me pray for us. God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this moment. Father, I know these conversations are so crazy complex, and I know each one of us have a story. And the thing I love about you is that you know our stories. You know what we need in life. You know what's most important to prioritize in life. So, Father, when it comes to our work, when it comes to our jobs, when it comes to our career, and when it comes to time, would you open our eyes to what we need to see? And would you give us the courage to make this kind of decision? I trust you with that in Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next week.